Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the Paranoia Contactee vlog. This is our very first one, and I'm incredibly excited to introduce my colleague Persephone. She's someone that I've been speaking to for the last 2 months. She's someone that has a number of experiences. So let me start off by welcoming you all to Persephone. Hi there.
And hi there, and thank you so much for giving me the chance to come here and talk. I'm excited and excited for your channel too. So
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really my very first one. So I feel very honoured to have you on there. And the fact you're able to share your experiences with us. So I suppose we should start off by just getting a little bit of information about yourself. Just share as
sure.
much as you'd like to share.
Sure. And, as I've said to other people, like I'm pretty comfortable talking about myself. And the only reason I go by Persephone rather than my real name is only to put some distance for family and friends who might be more uncomfortable with these things. So I kind of treat it like someone would treat like a stage name or a nom de plume or
Yeah,
something to that effect.
completely
Um,
understood.
but yeah, so my background, I was raised by a pretty conservative religious mother and, a very scientifically minded engineer, nuclear engineer father. And I myself was a musician, still am a musician, still releasing music kind of a thing. But that's pretty much my background of like what I'm coming from. Um, yeah, I don't know. And I've lived all over the US, moved a lot, and spent the most time though within Pennsylvania. So that's kind of where I reside currently.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And so, obviously, we first started talking because I was initially researching some Mantid
Yes.
contactee experiences, and you were very kind enough to reach out to me. And then, as we spoke, got to know you a bit better, and then we did an initial case study, which was based on the first two experiences, and these are something that will be shared on my site and the Bufog Truth Seekers site. But I think what I'm quite keen to do is to get people to understand those initial two experiences and really hear it from your perspective, because obviously, you were able to convey. I mean, from my perspective, it was a case of I found you particularly engaging, and the level of detail that you went into were, for me, gives that extra sort of credence that you often don't get from a lot of contactee cases. So I guess if I hand over to you, and then what I will
Sure.
do is I'll interject and ask questions as we go along.
Absolutely. Now, just to ask you, since you're familiar with my case, do you want me to do it like I usually do? Go through the short version of perfect. All right. So, uh, for me, I remembered it one way. And then this past year, 2023, through hypnotherapy with two brilliant hypnotherapists, I was able to actually recall things that had occurred. So, how it first started for me was I was coming home from Catholic school. This is September 1997, Bucks County, Pennsylvania area, rich in history, Revolutionary War, Civil War. My neighborhood, typical suburban neighborhood. Okay, like nothing spectacular. Farmland nearby, very like somewhere between suburban and rural in this kind of an area. And I was coming home from school. I was 9. I was a year ahead for my age, so American schools. I don't know how that works in the UK. But coming home from school, my bus driver usually drives up past this heavily wooded median around the circle, would drop me off right by my front door. My mother never needed to wait at a corner for me, and then keep going. This is the only day he ever changed his schedule. He stopped at the entrance to my neighborhood by the neighborhood sign and just like kind of stopped. And I was like, this isn't my stop. And he's like, well, it is today.
Yeah,
And,
and so I
yeah.
remember you saying that from the original case. Now, do you think there
Mhm.
was any significance to that? Do you think it was possibly part of the beginning of the experience?
Yes, personally, yes. And I've spoken with a lot of other experiencers as well, and we find that sometimes certain circumstances seem manipulated or different than they usually would be. In fact, today I just had a conversation with someone and we were saying how remarkable it is that people will just go back to normal, like
Mm,
nothing had happened afterwards as well. And so it does seem like there is an outside
yeah.
manipulation of events.
Okay.
So in this particular case, yeah, he said this is no, well, it is today. So I was like, okay, so I'm 9, I'm not going to argue with a fully grown adult that clearly is not going to drive me. So I get off, I start walking. very unseasonably warm day, very bright blue sky, white puffy clouds, like perfect day. But as I'm approaching this median area, back then, this median was heavily overgrown. They really didn't take care of it very well. So there was a lot of really tall bushes, overgrown trees. You almost couldn't see through from one side of the median to the other. Now, I don't know if that was on purpose to give privacy, but whenever someone would walk in this area, you could almost feel like it was darker or heavier, like for sure. So I was already as a kid apprehensive to have to walk through this area anyway.
Mhm.
Oh, and the houses are set back as well.
Okay.
So giving more privacy in the neighborhood. The houses aren't immediately right on the curb. There's like grass, some trees, houses. So you don't have a lot of great visibility there either.
Yeah.
As I stepped under this canopy of trees, it was as if everything went still. No wind, no birds, nothing. And I'm walking, and the only thing that I can hear is my feet on the asphalt, like my shoes, and the crunching of leaves because it's fall.
Yeah.
And I had this thought, like, there should be other children because it's right after school. There was a ton of other kids in this neighborhood. And so I was like, where are the other kids? Like, there should be other children. And pretty much the second that I thought that, I heard children playing Ring Around the Rosie. But it didn't sound like it was coming from any particular place. And honestly, I really think that it was only inside my head. Like, I don't think I was hearing it out loud, but I couldn't place where it was coming from. And then I had this just primal fear almost hit me. And I just thought, that's not children, that's not human. And I don't know where that thought came from, but it just came to me. And I started to run, and I felt like something was bearing down on me from behind.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And like I felt like something was coming after me. And so I started to run. Now, from that point to my house was a 2-minute walk. And I was running. Long legs for a kid. Shouldn't have taken me long to get to my driveway.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, I started to run. And then next thing, I was literally in my driveway running up to my front door. And I couldn't figure out how I'd gotten there so fast. It was just like suddenly I was in my driveway. Like, how does one,
Yeah.
And the only impression I had was I was hearing like almost like battle sounds, like battleground like noises, which I couldn't explain. And then there was like a reddish light or mist to the air in the trees around my house, like almost like all around me. And it just like, I was so terrified. And I ran up to my front door, and I'm like banging on the door because I didn't have a key. My parents were very paranoid about keeping the house locked up. So like, and typically, like I said, my mom would just come out, open the door, let me in normally. And so I'm banging on the door and she's not answering. And I'm like, where is she? And I think I just like sort of collapsed on the front stairs, like just, I didn't know where she was. And then like a moment later, it's like the door just opens and my mom's there and she's like, where have you been? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I was knocking, like I was trying to get in, and she didn't hear anything. And she was like, you're 45 minutes late. And I couldn't understand it because from my perspective, the walk from the bus to the house at max would have been 10 minutes. Yeah. And I was running for part of it. So where did that time go? And I just couldn't understand what had happened.
So it's a case of, so for you, did it feel very instantaneous? So it was like literally you're running and then suddenly you kind of just jumped, was it? Or was it like literally it was just a continuous run and then, oh, actually I got here quicker than I expected?
Now that you say that, I don't remember there being a jump. So from childhood memory, I'd say it was a continuous, like almost like no time had passed. It was just like, right. Here, oh, I'm here. Wait, what? Like,
Yeah.
Because for years, it took me a while to realize what had happened. And I would tell friends about this, and I'd even drive them to my old neighborhood. Like, you have to see this place. I had 45 minutes once where I just don't know what happened. Like, I would tell people about it. And honestly, that's why I think I remembered it for so long, nice. Was because I kept repeating that story to people. Okay. So I never forgot.
Okay. No, please carry on.
Sure. So this year, other events, which we will talk about later, started to lead me to think that something else was going on here. And I've had high strangeness my whole life, experiences, my family, like pretty much the impression in my family when something weird happens is, well, that's weird, and just move on. Like, nice. Yeah. And also I think growing up Catholic, there is a little bit more of that, like almost superstitious, like, like you're more accepting of weird things because for Catholics, at least, it's usually often a religious experience. So nobody wrote it off, but nobody really talked about it either. They were just like, that's strange, But I really wanted to explore this further, and I was on the Reddit subreddit, the
Yeah.
experiencers place, which is
Yeah.
great. If any of you want to talk about your story, it's a very safe and accepting place to go. I highly recommend it because they don't allow really negative comments there. So
Yeah.
it's a good first step, getting into this. So I went on there, and people recommended you should get hypnotherapy. So I went and I spoke to my regular therapist, and I was like, hey, am I okay to do this? Because, I didn't really know anything about
Yeah.
it. And she was like, no, absolutely, you should do it. Like, there's no, mental reason why you
Yeah.
shouldn't do this. I don't, I think you're fine to do it. So you should go ahead. So I went on the MUFON website and I found Lori McDonald. I am allowed to use her name now because I asked. So I
Okay.
found Lori, and she's absolutely wonderful, and she has a lot of experience with experiencers. So um, we got together, but she chose, rather than doing a regression, she was like, I sense that you have a lot of like natural psychic ability. I would rather, let you remember things on your own. So like, do you want to like work? Well, she gave me the choice, but she was like, we can open up your psychic abilities and you'll remember things on your own, or we could do a typical regression. And I was like, I want that one, because if I
Yeah.
remember more, that's the one I want. So we did that. And then we actually did later an inner child session. And that was the one that actually made everything click, because you're supposed to give your inner child a gift to make yourself feel more rooted. It's like a whole thing. It's very, very healing. Highly recommended, again, to anyone
Yeah.
who's interested in these things. But she gave me a gift. She gave me this blue sphere that floated over her hand. And the minute that happened, it's like I just started having memories. And I was like, I got to write this down. And I started writing things down. And then I ended up making friends with someone, Fiona Harris of Clear Path Healing, and she's a hypnotherapist, and she's also incredible. I like, please look her up, especially,
Yeah.
if you're in Canada, you can go see her. But she and I started working together. Now, I want to make it clear, she's not my therapist. I've never hired her. She and I work together as like
Yeah.
friends, but
Yeah.
she
Sure.
she does
Sure.
regressions for me because she wants to help me as
Yeah.
a, as an experiencer. So she actually did a regression, and this is what we uncovered. This event that occurred that day started earlier, and I didn't remember the first part that happened until we did the regressions, but I think it leads into it. So what happened was, I was at school. This is a school where I was being bullied at the time for, various reasons, and I was by myself. Normally there's a chaperone on this side of the playground, but for whatever reason, there was no chaperone. It's not typical that they would leave a
Yeah.
child by themselves. It's
Yeah.
just odd. I was on the swing, again, manipulation of
Yeah.
circumstances, like we're
Yeah.
saying. Um, I was singing to myself like I normally do, because it's just something I do. Musician,
Yeah.
emotional comfort. But all of a sudden there were people there, and I don't remember them walking up. I don't remember. It was just all of a sudden like, people are here with me. um there was a man standing in front of me who was about 6'2", pale, very elegant hands, dressed in a blue jumpsuit that was completely molded to his body. No seams, no zippers, no buttons, nothing that I could see. It was just like, it was just made to his form.
Yeah.
uh Beautiful blonde hair, the most striking blue eyes that I've still ever seen, and they almost glowed like they were illuminated almost from the inside, like there was something more
Yeah.
than human to them. But I didn't react to that at all. That didn't seem strange to me. um I also felt like I'd always known him, which was kind of a weird feeling. Like, I kind of got the impression like I'm familiar with him, even though this was like the first time we were meeting.
Nice. Okay.
And yeah, he came up and he sort of leaned over like on his knees like to talk to me, but I couldn't actually look past his waist. So he wore a silver belt, which actually in my childhood diaries I said did something, never
Yeah.
explained what it did, so I
Yeah.
don't know. And I could look about that far down, but if I tried to look past him I couldn't, and the reason is because there were quote unquote children behind him.
Okay.
That was what my mind told me, but I couldn't see them and I
Yeah.
couldn't look at them. But there were children behind him. It was almost like my gaze was locked on him, for the most part on his face or in his eyes. I couldn't look
Nice.
beyond that. There was a point I remember, like I looked down at my shoes because I remember that, but my shoes were like closer to me and he was further away, so I couldn't like look to see what was past him. My brain also told me he's a teacher, which didn't
Okay.
make sense because he didn't look anything like a teacher that would be at my school. Like, like maybe the maintenance men would have worn jumpsuits, but nothing like that. Like it just looked
Right.
odd. And the other odd thing was he had gold lettering on his chest, so it was like across his suit. It was like rather large written, and it looked almost geometric or like glyphs. I have tried to draw them in
Yeah.
with hip, and I really haven't been able to imitate what I saw. It's like that's not really right. The
Right.
only symbol that I distinctly remember was there was an upside down triangle. That has stuck with me, and I've seen it every time that I've seen him. So it means something to him, whether it's a symbol of something, like whatever. But
Yeah.
that's always been there. So he approaches and he's like, "Oh, what's that you're singing? Your voice is lovely." And his voice is perfect modern RP British, for
Right.
one thing, which I always
Okay.
thought was funny. I know, newscaster British, like,
Yeah.
are we on the BBC? What is this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
mm. And he was like, but also I never saw his lips move. Like, I don't have a memory of him talking. I just heard his voice as if he were speaking aloud, but he
Oh,
didn't speak
okay.
aloud. It was
So,
really
so,
weird.
so it's literally would be as you and me are talking now, apart from
Mhm.
both our lips wouldn't be. And so, when you were sort of talking to him, were you moving your lips, or was it a case of was it going through?
So I don't know. So in my more modern experiences, I'm able to speak without moving my mouth as well.
Okay.
But I don't know if back then I had that capability. So, and people would often tell me as a child that I would talk out loud to myself, by myself a lot. So it could be that I was just talking out loud. I don't
Right.
know.
Okay.
It's like a bad habit I've had forever. But yeah, I'm not certain is the answer from that time. I would really have to think about it. But without seeing a mirror of my own face, I don't know if I would know if I was speaking or not.
Sure. Sure.
Also, in general, it feels like sometimes when we're communicating, I'm able to, and actually, you know what, I'll just keep going because I'll give
Okay.
an
Okay.
example. I'll give an example of this, how we
Sure.
communicate. But he's like, "What are you singing?" And so, me being the precocious, annoyingly gifted child was like, "I'm singing the Phantom of the Opera. I've had the libretto memorized since third grade. Did you know that the book was different? Did you know that Eric doesn't end up with Christine? And that makes me sad." And he's kind of like, I could tell that he was amused. Like, I think I saw an eyebrow kind of raised, but like, a little bit of a smile, like, "Okay,
Yeah.
kid."
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's like, I am familiar with the Weber's version of the musical because it turns out there were others. I didn't know that as a kid, but
Mhm.
he's like, I'm familiar with Weber's version. I did know the book was different. And he's like, but you're singing to yourself. He's like, I sing to myself when I'm lonely. Are you lonely? Why are you by yourself? And I was like, trying not to say, well, the other kids are mean to me and they're bullying me, because this is an adult. You kind of want
Yeah.
to protect yourself as a kid
Of
and not
course.
admit that. So I'm starting to say, like, well, they just don't like me, or make some stupid excuse. But it was like he literally snapped images from my head. And so this is what I meant. Like, the other way that we communicate sometimes is almost like it's just instantaneous transfer of information. I have trouble interpreting when he does that
Yeah.
to me. I don't
Yeah.
always get everything, but for him, it's like he was
Yeah.
just pulling images from my head. So I saw me sitting at a table and three tables between myself and everyone else in the school, which actually did happen. Like, even the eighth
Yeah.
graders, I was just by myself at lunch. I saw a time that a kid was like pushing me in the dirt. Like, they were throwing my mom's hat over my head where I couldn't get it. And I was like trying to get
Yeah.
it back from them. Like, don't throw her hat. Oh no.
Yeah.
And he just pulled them like rapid fire. And so it felt like I
Okay.
told him, but I didn't tell him. He just knew. And he
Okay.
was like that strikes me as very lonely and very sad. And I was like, well, I never really thought of it as sad, again, trying to make excuses.
Yeah. Of
It was
course.
sad.
Yeah.
And so he was like, well, do you want to be my friend? And I think from a modern perspective, it's like, oh God, stranger danger, but I
Yeah.
didn't have any of that.
Okay.
And I felt very much like he was just kind of like, I don't know, like, my mom. So my mom being very Catholic, we spent a lot of time in the church choir, so I had a lot of friends that were fully grown adults, so it wasn't weird for me to be like, I
Yeah.
have, and it just, so like, I kind of just took it as like, a yeah, like, I'll be your friend, that's great.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was like, do you want to see the stars? Do you want to go on adventures? Didn't you want to be an astronaut? And a year earlier, I had seen Story Musgrave speak at a science fair in Maryland.
Oh, wow.
And I did want to be an astronaut,
Yeah.
but at the time I had very strong astigmatism that got worse as I got older. Now I've had laser surgery, yay. But back then, I had very thick, like, Coke bottle glasses,
Okay.
and so I was like, I can't ever be an astronaut, like, mentally, that's kind of my thought. But I was just like, well, yeah, no, I did want to be an astronaut. And so he either said, will you come with me or would you come with me? But he held out a hand to me.
Okay.
And I looked at his hand and I hesitated. And it wasn't from fear. It wasn't from an, oh, this guy's trying to take me away. It was just, I literally was like, I have to finish my school day. My mom's going to be really mad if I don't finish my school day. Like, and I like to learn. I like classes. Like, I don't like the
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah.
but I like class. Like, so I was just like, I can't. And so he just kind of smiled and he was like, okay, well, I'll come for you another day. And I said, okay. And next thing I know, he's gone. The children are gone. And I see a flash of something silver from behind the school like a minute later. And it's almost like the spell was broken. And I just suddenly was like, I don't want to be alone. I want to be with the other kids. Why am I here? And I kind of felt a little scared. And I went with the other kids and I completely forgot about it. The only thing that I remembered was there was a time when I was sitting on a swing set and people wanted to take me with them. That was the story that I took away from that. But I didn't remember any of the conversation or
Right.
anything until
Yeah.
hypnotherapy
And
with
so,
Fiona.
do you think that he was being literal at the time when you're saying "I'll come back for you"? I mean, did you feel any sort of fear at all, or was it just quite a matter of fact sort of statement?
No, it was very matter of fact. Like he was just kind of presenting it as because I think he knew that I genuinely was like, yeah, I'll come with you. Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
be your
Yeah.
friend. Like I'll go. Like I had the conscious, permission to go. Like I
Yeah.
was giving him permission, but he was just like, all right, I accept your reason for not going now, but I'm gonna come back for you. Like,
Right.
and I wasn't scared at all. Like it
Okay.
wasn't a scary
Okay.
thing.
Yeah. Sure.
Um, but so anyway, within days to weeks later, again, I was at the school for a pretty short time, so I kind of know my timeline, but
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
exactly when things happen because you're a
Sure.
kid and I don't remember. I have a poor memory for things like that anyway. So who knows? But because it could have been days or weeks later, but the incident with the bus happens. And again, I don't remember this conversation at all. So I'm just terrified, but also I kind of had that sense like something's coming to take me away. Like I knew that, but I didn't know what. And I didn't turn around, and that is my biggest regret to this day because Fiona has asked me like, did you look, did you see what was behind you? And I was like, no. And I wish I had because I would love to be able to tell people like I saw this ship and this
Yeah.
shape that I
Yeah.
saw and like a tic tac or something, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't turn around, I didn't look, so I have no idea because I had that childhood thing of if I don't look at it, it can't get me, so I'm just
Sure.
not going to look, I'm going to run. And that was like my reaction when if
Yeah.
something scary happened.
Yeah.
um Freeze. So I'm running, and then from hypnotherapy what we've learned
Yeah.
was it was like I was frozen in place. I don't remember necessarily seeing a light or anything, but it was like almost like I hit a certain point and I was just frozen, like I was stuck, I was paralyzed, I
Okay.
couldn't move. And then a second later I felt that feeling of just I'm up in the air, like I was up the air, I was looking down at like the trees, the median, the area that I'm in, like high, like up.
Oh wow. Right. Okay.
And then I blacked out. And there was no, I will add, when I was up in the air, there was no sensation of like, when you're on a roller coaster
Yeah.
or someone
Yeah.
who likes roller coasters and you're at the top and there's that moment where your stomach kind of goes up and you feel like,
Yeah.
oh God, I'm up in the air. I didn't feel inertia or anything. It was just
Right.
like 1 second I was on the ground and next second I was in the air and then I blacked out. It
And
was
so,
so strange.
yeah. So, whilst you was in the air, did you get the feeling that you had the air around you, or was it more of a sort of a pocket in the air?
Oh, that's a good question. I didn't feel the wind rushing past me. So I would say a pocket because there
Yeah.
was no, it was almost like that pocket of stillness that I talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Similarly, it was like that, but area, like there was something cushioning me from everything else. So like
Sure.
even when I was running, it's kind of that feeling of if I did scream right now, or even if I did ask for help, no one would hear me. Like there is
Right.
that kind of feel of like there's something blocking from everything else that's going on. So
Okay.
it's interesting. Um, so when I woke up, I'm in this very large space. There's metal surfaces almost all around me. To me, it looked like steel or aluminum, very brushed metal, very clean, clinical. We didn't talk about smells, interestingly enough, but Fiona
Yes.
and I did. We talked about it. So I said that I remember that I got an impression of sulfur, but also like something that was very like I want to say like clean, like somebody had cleaned the heck out of this place. And I don't know if it was
Okay.
bleach or some other clean, but I got this strong like this place is very clean,
Okay.
which was weird. But other than that, I at this point no other sense or anything like that. I was lying on a padded table, not unlike a padded table at like a doctor's office,
Yeah.
but and there were other tables like around me, and there was also areas that were partitioned off. Now, this room itself was huge, and it went up. So there were different layers. Like to me, it almost looked like an office building.
Yeah.
And mentally, I call this space the mezzanine, and I have no idea why I call it that because it really doesn't make sense. But in my mind, this was the mezzanine. So that's the
Okay.
mezzanine.
Okay.
And there's levels, and each level had like a half wall of either, it was almost like a golden or copperish metallic like edge. So it was kind of decorative, but not like, it was just, this is each floor. So I could see at least 3 or 4 layers up, but I really couldn't like crane my head up. I still didn't have like full control over my body at this point. I felt very out of it. The air itself, like I said, aside from the sense, was very like, it's weird because I want to describe it as thin, but at the same time full of oxygen. Like there was no
Okay.
pumps breathing. It was almost like if you've ever been to an oxygen bar,
Right.
like that overabundance of oxygen. It was almost like there was more rather than less. Like I could really, but it was strange, and I just felt very out of it. And I turned my head to look. Oh no! The first thing I saw was, oh, that's like those children that I'm seeing, but that's not a child because it was literally a small being that was probably maybe at most 5 feet, but I think it was less because of the height of the table. Oop, I think I froze on you.
Yeah,
okay,
no, you're okay. You're okay.
I'll go back. Because of the height of the table, gray being, big black almond shaped eyes, barely any nose, no mouth. I don't remember ears, bald head, and it was like doing something or adjusting something with the table. And every being or person, whatever that I saw in here was extremely busy, except for the humans that were here, like on the tables, like other than myself. Everybody was busy, and the impression I got was everyone has a function or a purpose, and they are doing that job, and that is what they do, and they do it efficiently. And there's no like, it's almost like worker bees. Like I'm doing this job. This is my thing. I'm going to do it right now, and it's very like quick. Like no nonsense, nobody's dawdling like, oh, look at that, like nobody's idling, like, everybody's busy. The table directly next to me, so I could kind of turn my head, so I started to try and look around me, and there was a man lying there, maybe in his 40s, graying hair, I remember that. And he was completely naked, and so me being 9, I immediately like turned my head back like, I don't know what that's about, I don't want to look over there, I'm not looking there. And there was a woman actually on the table in front of me. I draw her in my drawings, but that I've shown you. But so she was in front of me, and there was also there was almost like a white light over me that I actually, the more I'm thinking about it, it wasn't static. So like when we go to a dentist's office or something, it's like a static light that just kind of sits in one spot. I remember it kind of like moving, like it.
Oh, right.
Like, but it kind of was like in my face, and so it was like I couldn't really. I was trying to like look at everything around this light. And so from the silhouette of this light steps this being that had to be 7 or 8 feet tall. And for years, my mind blocked what it really was because I don't think I was prepared to accept what it was. But it was a mantis-like being. So and I'm struggling so hard to remember body. Was his body an insectoid body? Did he have a humanoid body? I really don't remember. I just remember that his head was like a mantis, like a praying mantis.
Right. So for people that might not be familiar with what a praying mantis is, do you think you could give a little bit more of a description?
Sure. So, and the other thing I'll say is he wasn't bright green like North American mantises tend to be. Whatever he was, his head was, I would say almost like almond shaped, but like, so like the pointy end is here, but it goes back and then is round, but he has these 2 huge round eyes on the side, and almost like not quite like pinchers. There was something to his face, but also like he was in silhouette at that point. So I couldn't fully make everything out, which is again why I'm like, did he, like, for myself, I'm like, okay, did he look humanoid otherwise, or like what did he look like? And I really, at this point, I don't know. I would have to sit there and regress and just stare at him and really try to like, but yeah, so bug like, insect like, not human. A darker green, so like almost like trying to think of a good like not quite avocado green, like still more on the side of bright green than avocado, but like somewhere like the skin of an avocado dark, like darker. So he approaches, and he seemed kind of, I got the impression that he didn't expect me to be awake, or I wasn't supposed to be awake yet. And so because I'm moving around, the first thought that I hear in my head of him speaking is, be still. And every encounter I've ever had with this being, he is extremely cold, like almost to the point of being mean, and like
Yeah.
very to the point, and almost like the worst bedside manner like a doctor
Right.
could ever have.
Okay.
Like just
Yeah.
like, so he just comes up and he's like, be still. And I'm like, okay, and he holds, and again, I can't even see his hands. Like I don't remember seeing hands, but there was a flash of a metal instrument that he held up either to my nose or put in my nose. But if he did put it in my nose, it was so fast I didn't even have time to register. The only thing that I felt was there was a really sharp pain like way up here, and I wanted to cry because it hurt. And I was like, and it was already, he was already like done by the time that happened. And meanwhile, one of the smaller gray ones was reaching up behind my neck. Wait, which side? Hold on, it's this side because the mole. That's how I remembered. And it was like checking a spot like behind my ear.
Yeah.
And it nodded to the mantis being, and the mantis being kind of like looked at him and was like, or it,
Yeah.
and was basically like, we're done here, take her. And that was pretty much that. And it moved off to the table where the man was on the other side. It just kept going, like, I'm done here, I'm gonna go. And these beings kind of like helped me up on the table. And again, it was weird. It was like I was drugged, but not. Like I had that feeling of like you're kind of asleep, but not asleep. Like you're half in a dream state, but everything was extremely vivid, like through the hypnotherapy, like the regression was extremely vivid. So they helped me up, and they start to take me across to another section, and they start to redress me in my school uniform. They did not give me back my blazer, my backpack, or my shoes, but they were all on me when I came back at the end. So
so they did.
point,
They
I
did.
got them back.
Right, they did come back, right? Because that's one of the things in the case that I couldn't remember whether they'd actually all come back. And okay,
That would have been really bad if I'd lost my school bag with all my books.
Yeah.
Oh man, that would have been rough. My mom would have been so mad. No, yeah, they gave them back to me, but later, and I don't remember them giving them back to me. I just know that I had them. So they tried to help me put on my stockings, and they were those really like thick cotton uniform stockings, like not typical stockings, and they couldn't figure it out. I don't know, for whatever reason they were like, we don't know how to do this. So I was just like, I'm gonna do it because you're not doing it right, and it's weird. Anyway, I didn't want them like dressing me, but they did, because they were just so fast. They were so fast. And then they're kind of pushing me forward towards like a hallway that goes under. So like where I was seeing all those layers, there's a hallway that goes like runs beneath it. And so they took me to that hallway, and then in the mouth of the hallway, like heading to my right, was someone waiting for me. Again, 6'2", tall, pale, slender, hands.
Yeah.
Molded black suit.
Okay.
Something like a high collared robe or cape or something, and just it was a very intimidating presence, like like especially as a kid, you're walking up to this person, you're like, I don't know what's going on here, but his hair was short cropped black, a little bit of like stubble, and he was wearing eyeliner, which as a 9-year-old in the 90s I thought was really funny, because I was like, why are you wearing eyeliner? Like I just thought it was so weird. I did not put two and two together that this was the same blonde being from the playground. I did not put that together in my mind, but it was the same being. Why he changed his appearance, I think, but I'm not sure, is 9-year-old me didn't know the kind of person that I'd be attracted to when I was older, but 100% the person that he was or is the person that I'm attracted to, like physically, human wise, that would be what I'd be into. But I didn't know that, so we walk up to him, or they kind of push me up to him, and he just is like, he seemed annoyed. Like I immediately got the impression he's annoyed, and I thought it was at me, because everybody so far had been annoyed at me. It felt like, right. And I was like, what have I done? Why are you all mad at me? Like, he was just very short, and he was like, my name is Demetrius, come with me. And he grabs me by the arm and he starts pulling me along. Now, these other beings went off. They did not stay. They did not accompany us. They were gone. So as far as I knew, it was just him and me. But as we know from later, there was another gray, taller gray with us, who was maybe 5 foot, like my height now, like 5'5".
Yeah.
But I didn't see her or register her at that time, because I was kind of stuck on this person, because I didn't know. I got the immediate impression that he knew everything about me. It was almost like he just read everything from me, like any secrets, fears, dreams, anything that I had, he just knew. there was nothing that I could possibly hide from this person. Like he just could see it all. And that was kind of terrifying a little bit. You know, he had a really strong grip, but the more important thing was he wouldn't have needed a strong grip to keep his hold on me, because mentally, like, I was really frightened, and I think I was asking to go home, or, you know, something to that effect. And pretty much he just silenced me with a look. Like, that's all it took. And it wasn't like, you know, somebody's intimidating and they're looking at you. It was like literally he went into my mind and shut off my fear. It was just like, nope, you're not scared now. And I was like, okay, I'm not scared now. You know, he takes me around the corner. We kind of follow this loop, and there's a sunken room. And it's actually funny because I remembered more details because I was speaking with other contactees who have been in this same kind of similar situation. I thought that was interesting. But it's like a sunken living room by American standards. I don't know if you guys have an equivalent in Britain, but it's like 2 steps down, and then there's like a room from the main hall.
Right. So in the UK, you tend to call it a snug. So it's like a smaller room that's just offset down a couple of steps. Yeah,
exactly.
I get what you mean.
And there's like tall like walls that kind of, they curved a little bit, but not like full curves. And it was almost like a grayish padded floor. You know, other contactees have said, oh, it was like carpet. And I was like, I kind of remember mine was more like padded, but gray floor. There was a huge window in there, bay window, that was shuttered closed by metal. I couldn't see out of it. And, you know, I was curious to know, like, why would you keep the window closed? But, you know, whatever. There was a window that was closed, and there were 5 beings sitting on the floor who looked extremely similar to the small grays, except that they had no face. I very strongly felt they were not living beings. The impression that I got were these are a machine that it has a purpose to teach something. Like, you know, like they're not living beings. They don't need to be living for this function, whatever, you know.
Right. Okay.
So there's 5 of them sitting there, and all of them are moving in unison, which is very scary. Like, to a child, you know, you're watching this, and their heads are just moving as one, and they're watching. There is this thing in the center of the circle that I call kinetic metal. I don't know what it actually is.
Yeah.
But when it's in the center of the circle, it's constantly like moving, changing shapes, like trying to be little pieces of metal, and not really like forming into one shape. But what would happen, and it was all blue, like it was metal, but they had, I guess, painted it blue, or it was blue, I don't know. But it would change, and then it sort of a being, like it would just sort of go towards a being and form into a perfectly blue sphere. And then the being would sort of turn its head, and all the others would watch it move, and it would pass it to another being. That being would take it, you know, would pass it to another being. If it hit the center of the circle, it would start to go crazy again, and then, you know, form back as it went to the other one. And I think the point was you were supposed to pass it across that space to practice, you know, forming it. But anyway, he walks me up to it, and he's like, and I'm like, I want to go home. And he's like, first, you're going to play a game. And I was like, okay, you know, and he's trying to explain to me the game, but it was almost like he put a zip file inside my head. So I couldn't fully parse what he was telling me, because it was like too much information stacked at once. So, and I'm also like watching it happen in front of me. So I'm trying to like get the message from him and see what's happening. And I was confused. And I said that, I was like, I'm confused. I don't understand. And he got really frustrated actually at me now. Oh, because I don't think he was frustrated at me. That's the thing. Fiona and I think that he was frustrated at the mantid being, because the two of them butt heads. They don't get along. I don't know why, but they don't like each other. And now he was frustrated at me, and he was like, Guinevere. And I was like, that's not my name. Like, because it wasn't, you know, but I would take it as my confirmation name a few years later. Didn't think of that at the time, you know. But he said Guinevere, and I was like, that's not my name. Stop calling me that. And he's like, you know, like basically like, you've done this before. And you know, and he's really frustrated. I don't understand what he's saying. And he's just like, you don't know you don't remember who you are. You don't know your own potential, is the phrasing he used. And now that feels more significant, but back then as a kid, I just was like, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're trying to tell me. And so at this point, this other gray being that's standing there steps up, and I realized that she's been there this whole time, because I didn't realize. And she steps up and she puts a hand on his arm. Now her fingers were really elongated. I remember that she had less fingers than a human hand, but I don't remember how many she had, especially because she's coming around the side of his arm and she's touching his arm. And I, you know, hear her say Axilia, like it's either his title or another part of his name, and
Yeah.
she's saying it very much like a "you need to calm down" kind of a
Yeah.
tone.
Yeah.
I definitely got a female. She didn't look female. There was nothing female about her anatomy. I don't even remember if she was wearing clothing, to be honest with you. I
Right.
don't recall clothing. But female, matronly, kind, warmth. That's kind of the vibe I got off of her. I still like her a lot. She's great. I like her. She's nice. You know. But she kind of touched his arm and was like, Exilia. And so then he kind of like steps back because he was getting heated. So he stepped back and took a second. And she's like, I'll explain it to you. I do not remember her using words, but something about whatever she explained, however she explained it to me, or she put it in my head, I understood that time. And I was like, okay, now I get it. So I sat down in the circle where there was a space for me and I started to play it. So the like I said, the purpose of the game, I think now, is not so much about keeping the shape of the ball and moving it telekinetically, because it seems like I was already able to do that. How, I don't know, because if I tried to do it now, obviously I couldn't do it now in the real world, like our world. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen. At least not yet. Maybe that's the future, who knows. But for now, not possible. So she or the ball, the forming of the ball is not the important part. The important part of the game is what I call the pass. So there would be almost like the being would look at you and you'd feel in your mind what I call a telepathic knock, almost like without words, they're saying, take this. And you would take it and you would kind of feel the moment that they let go of it and you had control of it. But that was a very tricky thing to master. So if you either didn't fully have it, well, they were always, they always knew when I fully had it. So they didn't mess up because they're a machine. So they did it perfect every time. But I was the one who messed up. So when I'm trying to pass it to one of the other ones, if they didn't fully have control of it yet, the whole thing would shatter into like all these metal pieces all over the floor. And that happened several times because it's very tricky to feel that. And the gray woman would kind of sit there and she would reform it, put it back in the center of the circle, and you'd start again. And so that happened a couple times, but I started to get the hang of it and I was starting to feel pretty confident, like, all right, I get how this game works. I'm getting it. I feel it. And I feel this sense of like pride, you know, accomplishment, like just like happiness from behind me. So I turn because I'm like, where is that coming from? And I see that Demetrius is watching the game and he has like a smirk on his face, like watching this, like he's very smug, very proud of himself, I feel also, but like, you know, like, yes, this is working. Like his eyes were like lit with excitement. Like, yes, this is going. And the moment that I saw that, you know, my little pre-adolescent, you know, heart is sitting there and goes ka-thump a little different because, you know, this handsome guy is watching me play this game and he's proud of me and that makes me feel really good. Pretty much the moment that happened and my heart beat like that, his attention just snaps to me like immediately. Like his eyes are just right on me and I was like, oh God, I did something wrong. Like I'm in trouble. I don't know what I did, but I'm in trouble. And I got two impressions in very quick succession that I don't think I was supposed to get, but I got. The first one was him thinking, that's not my function. You can't be serious. But it sounded almost like I got the impression that that was to someone else. He was saying that to someone else. And then to me, he was like, humans or people don't look at me like that.
Right.
But it shut down almost immediately. Like I was getting his vulnerable, raw feelings, but I wasn't supposed to be seeing that. So it was like, whoop, and it was just gone. And then I wasn't sensing anything else from him. And we're just kind of quietly staring at each other. And I'm like, okay. And then he was like, very slowly and calculatingly, he was like, do you find me attractive? And the ball behind me, I just completely lose control of, and the whole thing shatters because, you know, my God, why are you asking me this? And I was like nervous, and I think I said yes, or I nodded, or what. He knew I meant yes, even if I didn't say anything. And so, you know, he kind of was like very matter of fact, and he was like, someday I will be much more to you. But for now, I am just a friend. And I was relieved because I'm 9 and he's a full grown man. So that was kind of a scary moment for me. And I was like, all right, good, you know?
Absolutely. So do you think there were other people present there that you couldn't see? Because you made reference saying that you might think there was something else there.
Yeah. And a lot, I don't know if it was the mantid being, which I call the mentor, and I don't know why I call him that, but that's kind of been my nickname for him this whole time. So he's the mentor. I don't know if he was talking to him, or if, like you're saying, there were other people observing or something that I couldn't see. I mean, maybe that was the shuttered window. Maybe there were people behind that could see out that I couldn't see in, who knows? But yeah, I don't know who he was talking to, but in the second half we can get into, but like I think I know a little bit about what was going on there because of things that I've also uncovered with regression, but I'm not sure. All speculation at this point.
Okay.
Unless it's been outright told to me by him or others. So anyway, there was a jump in time at this point that I don't know what happened, and I have not been able to get it back yet, so I don't know what happened at this point. But next thing, we were in basically a flight deck, and it was a very small, compact room, very dark, not very well lit, which I thought was strange, because to me, you think flight deck, you think should be brightly lit panels and things, and I saw lights, but they weren't, like, it was weird. So I don't even remember there being windows, or if there were windows, they were closed at this point, so I couldn't see out. So everyone's like, did you see stars, did you see space? Like, no, I didn't. At that time I saw nothing, because I wasn't, I don't know, maybe they were trying to like slowly integrate me and be like, it's okay, you're not in space, like, you're okay, small-minded human, you'll be so scared, whatever, I don't know. So they show, this thing in the middle is a chair. It's literally like not unlike my gaming chair, like like a leather chair. And then there's these two half circles around it that looked like glass, but my brain told me they weren't glass, they were something other than glass. So maybe like a clear crystal or something like that. And there were symbols on it that were like the glyphs that were like on his shirt. But they almost seemed like they were raised off of the surface. Either they were floating above the surface, or they were like embossed, but like they were kind of off of the surface. And I remember thinking, like, that's such an unremarkable, I didn't say unremarkable, probably, I mean, I was gifted, but not like that. So I just remember thinking, wow, this is really dumb that this chair is just like an office chair. Like, it's weird. Like, I'm expecting something more, And he's in the middle of explaining to me that the second symbol on the right is an emergency stop. And he's like, this is very important for when you start to fly. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to fly. Like, I have astigmatism. Like, have you seen my glasses? Like, I can't, I'm not going to fly. And he just started laughing. And again, no, like, he was smiling, but I don't remember his mouth moving, but he was like leaning on the chair for support because he's laughing so hard. And I'm like, what is so funny about that? And I'm still not quite sure why that's so funny, but I suspect it has something to do with eyesight doesn't really matter for them when it comes to being able to fly a ship. So he just thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever said. And so he was just like, you won't, like, don't worry about that for now. And he was starting to explain something to me. And at that point, the mentor walks back in the room, and the two of them just immediately start to go at it, like, immediately, because the mentor's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm teaching her, like you told me. And the mentor's like, we don't have time for this, she's been gone too long, we have to put her back. And so he starts walking towards me with a syringe of yellow liquid that I immediately start to cow, because I'm like, what are you bringing towards me? Like, what is this? And Demetrius just kind of like spins me and like comes down to my level and like makes me look into his eyes, and he's, and immediately I just feel like warmth, comfort, safety, like all the, like, and I immediately, like, the fear is gone again. And he's just like, it'll be okay, we'll see each other again, it's all right as rain. Yeah. And I'm like, and syringe goes in my neck. A minute later I black out, like, just nothing. Right. And then when I wake up, I am running to my front door with no memory of any of that having just happened. Now, the battleground sounds was something that kind of came up as a question mark of like, why did you hear that, or what was that about? And so the only thing that we've kind of come to a conclusion with myself and my both hypnotherapists is that because I have some supposed natural psychic ability, maybe I was picking up on like the battlefields, because like that area, years ago had been part of battles and things historically. So it's possible. Also, we know that there's something with time dilation when it comes to their ships, obviously, because I felt like I'd been on the ship for like an hour, and even in my childhood diaries I say I was in there for an hour, but it was 45 minutes. So I don't know, time is different, it's weird. Time doesn't exist, time isn't linear. Personally, that's my thought. But anyway, but yeah, so pretty much from there I just woke up running again in my full uniform again with shoes and everything back to my front door, and that's pretty much the first experience that I had that I recall.
I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. I mean, So obviously, one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was that your father worked at the nuclear plant. Do you at any time think there was any sort of maybe that had any sort of connection, or is that just more of a sort of that's just a coincidence?
I don't know. So, and he was actually a nuclear engineer, so he actually built the plants,
Oh,
and then
right,
eventually,
right,
and he built plants all over the world. He was definitely responsible for some of that, and he um eventually kind of moved into more like sales when it comes to that
right.
sort of a thing. So
Yeah,
he didn't stay in that
yeah,
area. But other people have brought that up as a coincidence because we know that this phenomenon seems to have an interest in nuclear things. So is that
absolutely.
it?
Yeah,
I don't know. Based on what I know from this particular being, he and I have had a connection for probably much, much, much longer than that. What exactly that is, I don't know. So, like, that was already there, but why did this whole group take an interest in me? I don't know. I'm not sure.
yeah.
So,
Okay. And the other question I wanted to ask was, so you briefly talked about it earlier on, but what was the moment that made you think, right, okay, so this is something that happened early on in my childhood. Now I feel that I want to investigate it further. So was there a particular point that happened?
I heard Terry Lovelace talking on the Astonishing Legends podcast about his story, and there were certain things that he said that they just hit me really strangely. And one of them was the talking about on his ship he saw a tall being that instantly knew all of his, fears, secrets,
Hmm.
everything, just knew him entirely, and he
Hmm.
felt it as a very much of an invasion of privacy. Personally, when it comes to my being, I feel like more of a he knows me so completely, so I trust him
Yeah,
more than the others because he knows me better than everyone else there. But at the same time, I just that moment was, because again, I didn't have those
yeah,
memories at that point, so it's just something about that made me go like, this is familiar and I don't know why, and I kind of want to research it further.
yeah,
He also mentioned about falling asleep during his hiking trip, and we can talk later, but
yeah,
there was things later that happened like more recently that I was like, man, maybe that's something I should think about or look into.
yeah. And
Helicopters.
well, that's it. And then the last question, because I appreciate we're coming to the end of
Yes.
this particular session, is that so have you spoken to anyone else that you think has been in the same environment as you?
So not, I mean, yes and no. Like I've had some conversations with some contactees who have been aboard ships, but different ships. I don't know if anybody has yet. I've not met anyone who's like, I was on the same ship as you, or oh, hey, I
Mm.
saw you there. Like I've
Yeah,
not had that experience
yeah,
yet. I did have one contactee who was like, you seem really familiar to me. And like he and I kind of became pretty fast friends, and it was kind of
yeah,
weird. And I was like, I don't know how I know you because I don't know you, but like,
yeah,
so that, but that could also just be like, I don't know. I try not to read too much into that until I know
yeah.
for sure.
Sure.
It's like, because then you could start seeing it everywhere. Like there's connections,
Yeah,
just stuff.
absolutely. So, yeah, obviously, I want to say thank you very much for sharing those initial experiences. This is the end of part one, and what we will do is we'll have a follow-up session soon after this, where we'll talk about some of the other experiences. But I think for me, it's very interesting because all the time that we've spoken together, you have been completely consistent in what you have said. It's a case of you've been very descriptive in what you've said. I personally find you very engaging,
Thank you.
and it's a case of I think this is a great opportunity. So what I'm really interested in is if people get the opportunity to watch this video, and what it does is if it maybe sort of makes people think about some similar experiences that they've had, then obviously I'd welcome you all to reach out to myself. And, as I would like to do follow up interviews with a number of different people, just so we can share all the information that we've got. Because at the end of the day, all this channel is about is sharing all the experiences and, hopefully try and bring people together and try and understand what's happening here. So what I'd like to do is say thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to the follow-up session. So thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And thanks for having me. Thanks.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Thank you.